Greetings, everybody. It is Thursday night at 7:30 in the Central Time Zone, and it's time once again for cinematic conversations. And sometimes we have contemporary films, and sometimes we have classic films. And classic films really help us understand the world we live in a very different kind of way. And it's very important, I believe, to really see the best of classic cinema. And today we have a really wonderful film, which I'm sure all of you have seen because you've all done your homework and you had a great opportunity to revisit. I'm just going to pronounce it The Bicycle Thieves because I can't speak Italian, but we have two wonderful guests who both speak Italian and study Italian and teach Italian and teach Italian film. So we have Daniele Forlino. Okay, so I don't know if I got that right, but Daniele, pleasure to meet you, and Nicholas Albanese. And Nicholas, nice to meet you.
Pleasure,
Daniele
Mark.
teaches at SMU, and Nicholas teaches at TCU. And first of all, thank you so much for being here. And your insights are really going to be helpful to me. I teach film and I love film, but the cultural history is like, that's not where I am about. But this film is really important in its theme, in its filmmaking, and sort of what it inspired. But before we get into the details of the film, it's really important to understand the history because this film comes from a place and historical facts that happened and how individuals had to deal with that reality. So Daniele, do you want to sort of fill us in to Mussolini, World War II and post-World War
Sure,
II?
sure. I'll try to summarize some main events in a couple of minutes. So if we think about Italian society in 1948, and that's when the film was released, we should also consider, first of all, fascism. So from the 20s up to 1943, that's when Benito Mussolini, the leader, the Duce, was dismissed. Then we have to consider, so first of all, fascism and 20 and past years of one voice. So this is very important because neorealism, and Nick will talk a little bit about neorealism, comes out as the voice that was suppressed, that was covered during the years of fascism. So fascism will end in officially in 19. It's sometimes it's still here, unfortunately, in the air somewhere. But fascism officially ends in 1943. Mussolini is dismissed. In Italy, there is pure chaos until 1945. Well, between 1943 and 1945, those years are called the years of the resistance, the years of the liberation of Italy. So the main political power during those years, we don't have fascism anymore. So between 1943 and 55, who is trying to liberate Italy from Nazi forces are actually the partisans. So these are six political forces from the left side that are leading the country, that would like to liberate the country. So that's how we get to 1945,
Danielle,
right?
let me ask you another question. I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah.
because the word fascist gets thrown around a lot these days and is almost somewhat meaningless because anytime you don't like what somebody says, you just call them a fascist. So in terms of Italian fascism, what did that really mean?
Mhm. Well, when I think about fascism, Italian fascism, I think at least of three key words. I think about as an expression, extreme expression of socialism, but I also think about nationalism. One of the mottos of fascism is everything within the state. So that means that the state is controlling everything, even culture, even cinema. In fact, actually, Cinecittà will be financed, will be built with fascism during the 30s. In 1937, will be opened. the inauguration, Mussolini will be there. So when we think about fascism, we think about a system that has only one leader and a system that regulates the life of the citizenships of the country. In the specific case of Italy, we had this leader, Benito Mussolini, for over 20 years. So that means 20 years of the same color, basically, if you want to have an idea of how Italian society was.
So that was
I hope
really
that.
great. No, absolutely. So why why were the economic situations so bad in post-war Italy, and why was unemployment so high?
Well, first of all, Italy lost the war. So if you lose the war, you also have debts with the other countries that won the war, right? Then we have to say also that Italy was one of the countries that had more damages in terms of infrastructures in Europe. And unemployment for sure was one of the biggest problems. Inflation, unemployment, debts, these are the main problems, along with political instability. Uh, that's very important, the political instability, because Italy needed international support, and actually will find international support in 1947 and 1948. Will knock on the door of the White House, and actually President Truman will be happy to help the Italian state. If though the Communist Party is ejected by the Italian government in 1948. And that's, something very powerful. Anyways, the president decides to eject the Communist Party in 1948, even though the Communist Party was one of the main forces that led to the liberation of Italy. The Communist Party was one of the main forces that helped to write the new ultra-democratic constitution that Italy enacted in 1948. So that's very important. The first article of the Italian Constitution, beautiful. L'Italia è una repubblica democratica fondata sul lavoro. So Italy is a democratic republic based on what? On labor. So that's a very communist concept that you have out there. And at the same time, in a movie like Bicycle Thieves, at the center of Bicycle Thieves, the social problem is unemployment. Yes. Italy didn't offer jobs at that time. There was not yet enough money to make the economic machine restart. It will happen eventually with the Marshall Plan. Between 1948 and 1952, 3 or 4 years, they will inject a lot of resources in the economic system. The machine will restart, and that will bring us to the economic miracle. We call it miracle, even though there are many shadows when we think about that miracle. Anyways, the Marshall Plan will actually push for the economic miracle of the 50s.
All right, that is great. So Nicholas, tell us about Italian neorealism, because to understand this film, it really comes out of a movement.
Yeah, it does, and what we now consider this movement, neorealism, was born in part out of necessity. And right there, it was really at the end of the last year of the war, just after Italy was liberated, that the earliest directors, and here I'm pointing mostly at Roberto Rossellini, began to make a film without any of the equipment. He didn't have, Cinecittà was destroyed. It had been turned into a refugee camp, I believe. The electricity was spotty, so it couldn't maintain the cameras. He couldn't find film stock, so he was trying to collect all these different types of stock, put them all together. And this really brought him to film on location rather than in studios, with the sound quality, everything had to be redubbed. Later, that was another particular quality. But I think, as Daniele mentioned earlier, it's difficult to even talk about this as a movement. It was more after 20 years of fascism, after the devastating consequences of World War II. It sort of developed as an organic need by most everyone to tell their stories. After for 20 years, they were not allowed really to see or represent reality in any honest way. They these filmmakers, and really this is a movement that began in literature in the probably in the 30s, if not the late 1920s. And then the same sort of thing happened in film. The censorship laws were very strict, and now everyone all of a sudden could tell their stories. And this is something that everyone wanted to do, each in their own sort of different way. This is something that, for example, Italo Calvino talks about this in his preface to his neorealist novel, Il Sentiero dei Nidi di Ragno, The Path of the Spider's Nest, and how this was an organic movement. And what these filmmakers tried to do, I think, was to show reality in an honest and ethical way, which, however, is no less poetic than any other sort of artistic representation. I think sometimes we think of neorealism, we get too caught up in, oh, this is just what real life was like. The directors threw a camera in the middle of the street, they filmed people, and that was their movie. But I think that's a little misleading, because this is also it's an aesthetic, really, as well as the subject matter. Subject matter is, as Daniele was talking about, unemployment, social injustice, all kinds of issues, which, of course, after the war, there was plenty of subject matter to be filmed. But with Ladri di Biciclette, for example, a few years after the war, 3 years later, the subject matter was much less dramatic. Someone stole a bike, okay, but still the representation of that reality gets put onto a poetic plane, as De Sica used to say. Yes, these are about real things, but to say that it's realism is that these are not documentaries. These are films. These are movies. Yeah. And his goal was to put this reality onto a poetic and lyrical plane, which is exactly what he did. And you're absolutely right, Bart, when you say we're talking about a handful of films here. There were hundreds of films produced in Italy after 1945. Only about 10–11% of them can be called neorealist films, and almost all of those were flops. They didn't go anywhere. We can boil it down to about 7 films between Rossellini's 3 films, De Sica's 3 films, and we can throw in Visconti's La Terra Trema, really. Yeah. And that's within the span of a few brief years that really characterized the whole sort of neorealist cinema, or the image of neorealist cinema in Italy and around the world.
So when we think of Italian neorealism, you think about things being shot in the streets, thinking of stories that are real stories that happen to real people, but also they're built on the idea of not using trained actors. And so in this case, we have several main characters and a lot of extras. It's one of the things I love about the film is what I call the anthropological value of the film, is like seeing all of those different environments and seeing the restaurants and seeing, all the places where they're trying to find the bicycle. It's just like incredible seeing the real world. But so why did they initially choose not to work with movie actors, other than the fact that they probably didn't have money to pay them?
Well, I think the biggest thing, at least in terms of De Sica's film, was he always talked about the corrupting nature of cinema. And what did he mean by that? He thought, well, if you get actors, professional actors in here, then this is no longer the aesthetic that we're looking for. He wanted actors who were genuine, who had a fresh look, who were unknown. They had no past experience in on the stage, so you couldn't make any connections with other cinematic works that they had done. And this is something that Rossellini used professional actors in Roma Città Aperta, for example.
Mhm.
But De Sica actually got an offer to finance Ladri di Biciclette from Paramount, and he turned it down because they would have forced him to use Cary Grant as the lead actor. And thankfully, he and Zavattini said, no, that's not the aesthetic we're looking
I'm just
for.
trying to picture in my mind
Yeah, right. It would be
the
a complete
Paramount
different
version of the
Yeah.
Bicycle Thieves. And just the soundtrack that there would be there, and it just it's just wrong, and it just sort of speaks to the insanity of Hollywood that they think that they could sort of do this. So from De Sica's point of view, I think if I remember correctly, that he had some background in theater, but how did he sort of work with non-actors? Because it's all, it's very difficult, particularly when you don't have a lot of film. You can't do take 6 and take 7 and take 8 to sort of get everything out there in the way you want that. How do you, and do you know, how did he work with actors who had no training?
Well, De Sica became in the 1930s. He was a star in Italian cinema in the
Mhm.
30s. He had a theater background. I think he did some vaudeville type things. And it was the theater really that pushed him towards directing. He began in, I think, 1940. But he would take these non-professional actors, and he went through great lengths to find the right visual look with these actors. He really struggled. They started producing filming Ladri di Biciclette without having cast the role of Bruno, for example. Yeah, because he didn't find the right person to play that part. But
Bruno
he
is
would,
so great. He is like,
yeah, isn't it?
to me, he's the star of the film.
That's
His
it.
expression, I mean,
That's
if
it.
you think about it, in many ways, the film is about how he sees his father, because you are constantly looking at him, looking at his father.
Yeah,
And it's sort of the central, to me, moral situation of the film. And so having somebody who can convey that in his eyes, which he does really, really
does
well.
it. And De Sica would actually oftentimes act out the role first so that the actors could then imitate him, because he was such a good actor. He knew how to do anything that they needed to do. He would teach them just those few tricks that they needed, okay, to still maintain that freshness and that look that he wanted without corrupting them. And his non-professional actors, if you compare the non-professional actors of De Sica with those of Rossellini and Visconti, the results are so much better in the films of De Sica, exactly for his ability to coach them.
Yeah, having a background in both film and in theater certainly gives you, I think, a real heads up. And it is hard to work with non-actors, but clearly it works really well. So this came from a book, is that right? And have either of you read the book that this came from, and can talk about how that's different from the film?
I didn't read the book, but Zavattini wrote the movie together with De Sica,
Mhm.
who's a great writer and influenced also the interpretation of neorealism during the late 40s and 50s. Unfortunately, though, I didn't read the book.
Okay.
The
All right.
book, I didn't read the book either. It has little to do, other than the title and the idea of stolen bicycles, has little to do with the story of the book. I think Zavattini read the book, called up De Sica. He said, I got an idea I got from this book. And then they just made up their own story based on what was in the book.
So,
One book though that I would like to suggest for the audience, the spectators of Bicycle Thieves, would be The House of the Metal Tree, that is from Verga. It's a book from 1884, I believe, and it's very powerful. And when you read this novel about this Sicilian family, uh, you can see many points of contact with bicycle thieves and the hope that tomorrow we are going to experience a better future. That's basically what happens in Bicycle Thieves. There is this hope that progress, social progress, economic progress is going to make our tomorrow a better day. So I would strongly keep the two artworks together. Also because neorealism also comes in a way from verismo, that is what we have in literature at the end of the 19th century in Italy.
so for each of you, what is the most important part of this film? The film that sort of speaks to you, and when you show this to your students now, what is the part of this film that they respond to? And somebody said, could you maybe type the name of the book in the chat so people can read it?
Yes, absolutely.
Nicholas, do you want to start with that? Like, what is the part? And you do show this to your students, don't you?
I do. Well, the part that speaks most to my students is Bruno. There's just no question. I mean, they really take to that relationship with Bruno and his father. They always point out how much they love his hair too in this film. He does have great hair, but
I also love that Bruno knows all the details about the bike.
bike exactly. That's exactly right. So they take to that first and foremost. That's the most immediate, I think, impact they get out of the film. Um, for me, I think what I try to impress upon students is the what's the word? How this is sort of an anti cinema, or in any case, it challenges the way that we watch movies. And I think this is part of De Sica's intent, was to set up a contrast between commercial Hollywood films, right, which are, get some references directly in the movie, of course. But he also sort of subverts the way that he puts us in a difficult situation at the point in the film when Antonio steals the bike, because that's the protagonist we're all supposed to be rooting for. We're supposed to be identifying with him, and then all of a sudden, oh, wait a minute, he's now done something that, on our sensibilities, would be morally speaking the wrong thing, right? He makes a mistake. He shouldn't have done that. Not only because he got caught, but and that sort of sets up this film, right, to be one that's very different, certainly for our students in watching this, and that's something that I particularly enjoy and focus on.
Yeah, it's a very difficult moment in the film, and for us as viewers, of course, we're rooting for him. But
Yeah.
the thing is that up until then, for the like 15, 20 minutes before then, he's not been behaving very well. And it's kind of this slow descent into how this is affecting him. He's not very nice to this poor guy who happened to see something and happens to know something. And he's, in that church, he's just kind of being a jerk. And his son, Bruno is seeing him, and being disappointed and throughout. And so at the moment when he has that really dark place, De Sica has really set us up for that moment. So that in the beginning and through most of the film, I mean, we all are rooting for him to win. But and of course, when he does steal the bike, we feel his pain. and we as an audience are in this conflicted moment, right? We know
Exactly right.
morally that stealing that bike is wrong, and we also know that by stealing that bike, you're doing the same thing that somebody did to him. And there's somebody on the other side who's going to go through the same thing that he's going through. Yet, and I think it's probably one of the things that makes the film so successful, because it is full of this complexity. There
Yeah.
is no simple answer, and there is no answer.
No,
It's like, it's not going to be better tomorrow. It might be
no.
better, but it probably won't be. I mean, at the end of the film, it's a bunch of people from the back. They're all having trouble. They're all kind of moving this direction away. And it's many years before things get better. And it's very sad, but it makes us feel the sadness and feel the empathy. And I think that is perhaps the
Yep.
biggest thing that this film does for us as people. It makes us understand in a way that Hollywood films don't, because a Hollywood film has to have an easy ending,
Yeah.
right? At
That's
the
right.
end of any Hollywood film, you know what you feel and you know why you feel it, and the good guys win. And here it's like you just sort of feel like things are stacked against everybody, and it's kind of hard to make it forward.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Danielle, you have some thoughts on that? Or
Uh, I
what do your
was I,
students?
I was thinking about, you defined it as complex. I totally agree. When in the last sequence, Bruno is screaming, Papa, Papa, we are completely confused because we don't know if he's saying Papa just because he loves his father, or because the father is losing his dignity in front of him, or if he's trying to defend the father. And that's another thing that could come from Bruno, because Bruno is almost an adult in the way that he behaves and many times corrects the father.
Mm,
It will end up that Bruno actually saves the father because they will not report
yes.
Antonio. And then Antonio will be part of the crowd and belong to that river of people. But yeah, I agree with complexity that is represented in many sequences. I'm also thinking about, one of the themes is social classes, social divide.
Mm,
And I'm thinking about the scene at the restaurant.
the dinner scene. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, we have many feelings there. We first we It's frustrating to see that they are spending the little money that they have on a nice meal, but then we also understand, right, that they would like to do something nice after hours of struggle. And then we understand also that there is always somebody next to us that is gonna order something that is more expensive. And it's like a loop that never ends. And the question that we have until the end of the movie is, what should we care about? And I think that that's key, especially, this is a negative, a very pessimistic film, but there is one hope. And I think is, caring of each other. That's exactly what Bruno and Antonio do. They are there since the beginning until the end, always helping each other.
And
At
there's
the
a lot of
same,
that too. If you think about, even when he has all of those people in that small part of the town who are out against him, all of them think that he's crazy, and it's not true, but all of them are helping out each other, right?
yeah,
That
yes,
community of people is all supporting this guy who we don't know if that was the person or not, but we definitely do, all the way through. And when he finds out that Michael's written, his friends come and help him the next day. There is
yes,
this sense of people helping out each other, that people
yes,
are caring, they are their brother's keepers, and all the way through. Even when he steals the bike at the end, all the people are going out trying to find
mhm,
him to
right,
put him away. There is this sense of community that, you know, I sadly, we don't have that kind of community. We have community for tribes, but if somebody was just hurt, would a whole bunch of people that didn't know them come down there? I don't know that we're in the place where we have that deep level of empathy and community for just people who are, part of our community. And I think that's really kind of important. Another scene that is just incredibly memorable to me is the whole thing about the going to the pawn shop. And I just recently watched The Pawnbroker. So I was like thinking about I don't know if you've seen The Pawnbroker, but it's a very, very powerful film. And just like to see that whole exchange was really kind of fascinating with that in the back of my head. But then the last shot of that sequence, when he takes the material, takes the thing, and he puts it up there, and you see how many sheets are
The
there.
camera is tilting and you see how many people are in the same exact situation. And that's, what makes you understand, first of all, that unemployment was a huge problem in Italy in 1948. One, so many people were in the same situation of Antonio Ricci or the Ricci's family.
Yeah.
But then you also understand that these people had, you see them through the little window, the little power that they have while negotiating also for how much money they can get from their sheets, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's also another thing. You never win. And it's not up to you to decide how much money you're going to make. Somebody else is going to tell you what you're going to make. So very powerful when the camera is tilting and you see that these, you cannot count them. Just to understand the entity of the social problem that is, one of the main topics of the film.
Art,
Yeah.
Art, did you notice when they were getting paid for the sheets?
Yeah.
They were getting paid in bills. The bills were the size of placemats.
Yes. And well, you remember there was incredible inflation during those times.
And the money was worthless. It was huge, but worthless.
And a little difference with the American bills is that in Italy you have, or at least you had, different sizes for different values.
Oh.
So in America, the same size, just look at the number.
Yeah.
But in Italy, the bigger, the better. Yeah. So these huge bills, were something for the family.
And the thing about the pawn shop, the last thing to put a capper on this is, I kept feeling that when you saw all of those sheets, that this pawnbroker is never getting money back from them, because nobody's going to come back for all of those sheets. So the money that he's giving, even though nobody ever gets the money they want, because everybody thinks their sheets are worth a lot more than they are, this poor guy is stuck with all that stuff. And it's just, what's he going to do with it? It's just sad all the way through. I mean, it's very deeply sad. That scene when they're eating dinner, when they're eating the mozzarella sandwich, when they go and eat, which is, I love the little music in the background. I thought that was great. And I love the two kids looking at each other. Because to Bruno has probably never really had that sense of class conflict. I don't think that he's seen somebody from a different universe, like, and sort of trying to compare himself, and in a sense, understanding his self-worth and who he is as compared to somebody else. And I think it was, and he doesn't find it all that sad. He's just kind of play with his food a little bit and trying to find some way. It's like he's not at that point yet where he's ashamed of his place in life. And at the same time, I felt when he's sitting there eating and drinking the whole bottle of wine, I just keep thinking, and what's he going to say when he gets home? And he's going to tell poor Maria that he's spent money on food when they don't have any money and she just gave up her sheets. But it is kind of part of this male ego problem of like, you know, we got a little money in our pocket, we need to go and do something and have a moment with my son where I can sort of connect with him. But, you know, that was clearly not the best choice at that moment.
Correct. He had just slapped him right earlier, and he's trying to get back into his good graces. Let's go have a pizza, and then they get into this restaurant, which was not a pizzeria. Ask for pizza, and then they don't even serve pizza there. They're just sort of out of place for that. It's just, to me, it's an uncomfortable scene because I feel the, you know, the exclusion and the how they're sort of just, they just don't belong there. And that, I have that sense throughout the entire scene. And then at the end, I think it's Antonio finally realizes kind of a mistake. What are we doing here? You know, we're never going to find this bike. He starts getting sort of depressed and despaired about it.
So the scenes at the flea markets, which are really kind of fascinating, is that very, I mean, was that done in with real flea markets behind them? Or I don't assume that they got all of those extras and paid them all money.
They got extras. They had, I know one scene, one of the market scene, they had 40 vendors. They hired 40 people to set up the whole scene there. And in the one where it's raining, I mean, this was actually a pretty, not such a, the budget for this film was relatively high for the time. They had 100 million lire.
Of course, there's inflation, so that doesn't go
Of course,
very far.
exactly. But relative to other films, for
Yeah.
example, again, with Rossellini's Roma Città Aperta, this was a relatively big budget film. And they got the fire department to shoot water up in the air for the rain scene in the middle of the square where everyone's running from the rain and they're getting out of there. So they sort of did reproduce at least parts of those flea market scenes.
Was the fact that he included a pedophile scandalous?
I don't know how that was sort of received originally, but yeah, that's another. It's an odd. It strikes me as a little bit odd, that scene.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's odd.
Strange, and every once in a while in Italian cinema, you can find these little episodes that you know, when you watch them, say, oh, maybe it's a mistake. What's going on? And then you reflect, and you know, it's something real that is there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's strange, and nobody though talks about it, or at least I never read an article about that specific episode.
When we talk about it in my classroom, we talk about how the parent is struggling to survive and isn't able to fully pay attention to the child. And so it kind of maybe exemplifies the possibility that the children happen to be in more danger sometimes. Because of the struggle, there are more dangers. That's how we discuss it in our class.
But Tal, I think that Bruno is like, he's got it together. Bruno's got very good survival skills. He knows what goes into a whatever that model of the bike really well.
Right.
And
the
he's got
fetus, right?
What the yes, and the 37 model, whatever. And he's got his head is on straight, you know. He has a very clear moral compass.
He does that since the beginning, when you know, they finally have the bike and they go to work together with a lot of enthusiasm, super happy also for the sandwich with the frittata. Is Bruno the one that takes care of the door of the window for the little brother that is sleeping, making sure that he doesn't catch a cold. So he's like an adult, and he's the only one actually that has a job in the film.
Right.
He works at the local gas station.
Right.
So he actually is a breadwinner for the family.
Yeah, and I guess before he gets the job putting up the posters, he is the only breadwinner for the family. And after he loses his
Yeah.
bike, that is the only income they have. So one of the things and this is a silly thing to think of, but how is he supposed to put up posters and look for his bike at the same time? I'm sure every one of those people who had that same job and they're all like leaving at the same time, how did they like not get their bike stolen? Because you can't be looking here and looking down there. And, you know, clearly with so much poverty, you would imagine that there would be substantial crime. I'm sure this is not something that just a rare occurrence. And not a single person had a lock on their bicycle anyplace.
It's always the question I ask about, no one has a lock. And I don't know if locks weren't just available at that time after the war, or if they were too expensive. We can't buy the bike and a lock, or I don't know how to explain that. But there's no sort of locks there. Crime was certainly rampant. Stealing of bikes was, as we saw in the market. They're repainting bikes and reselling them, and all the time. So yeah, it's certainly something that didn't happen only to Antonio. But in this story, it's particularly focused on him and that bike and all that sort of represents for him and his family, for Bruno too, especially. He was sort of the breadwinner of the family until we got the bike out of the pawn shop. Now dad can be the breadwinner, and this is the way things are supposed to be. So Bruno's taking the first shot we see of Bruno is he's cleaning the bike, he's taking care of it, checking it. Oh, there's a dent here. He's worried about the dent in it, and he's all concerned about that, because that for him represents the family's back sort of where it should be. We have our patriarch again, who is the breadwinner, and it doesn't have to be me. I can be a kid again.
Everything is in place. Yeah.
But I also think that he just was into the bike. You know how like kids of that age might be interested in baseball and they know all the statistics and all of that. That's the age when you're into like stuff. And the bike was his thing, you know?
Certainly.
I thought that, Bart, given our present day relationship with police, the relationship with police in that culture was, when a policeman shows up, an entire crowd of men stops talking and turns around to look at him. And, going to call a cop, don't go call a cop. That's like, we don't want to deal with the cops, because, the police had incredible authority.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
But they also didn't have any time for him at all. I mean, they blew him off completely.
Well, but that guy took a lot of time with him. He went into the house, he looked for the bike under the bed.
I'm talking about when he went in after the bike
police
was
station.
stolen.
Oh, yeah, well, that was just, he was just being realistic. How are you going to find a stolen bicycle in Rome if you haven't found it 10 minutes or 5 minutes after it was stolen? Forget about it. The cop was realistic.
The problem of that scene at the police station is that he goes there, right, to report the bike that was stolen. And he actually believes in the power of the institutions. And he believes that somebody's going to help him.
Mm-hmm.
And when at the end of that sequence, somebody calls the detective and says, "What happened?" And he says, "Oh, nothing. They just took a bike." That makes also you understand how a little problem of somebody could actually be a huge problem for a family. So how everything is very relative. And that bike, still represents faith, trust in the future, faith, trust that the tomorrow of this family is going to be better. It's never going to be, because they don't find the bike at the end of the day. But it's one of the first examples when an official institution is not working properly, is not listening to to this poor man that is looking for the bike. Why? Because there are other major problems that Italy is facing. Right. Another consideration is also the fact that Italians are very skeptical when we think about authority and authorities. This is historical, it's an historical problem. If you think about the unification of Italy in 1861, you see Italy going from one political system to another political system, from one kingdom to another kingdom. So all these invasors are actually like the police, external institutions that you don't trust of them. And I feel that that's how many times Antonio felt, or many people in the crowd felt when calling or not the police. The police might bring other additional problems for them.
Well, sometimes when you think about Italy, you think about gangsters and the Godfather and all of that. What was that during this era? How much was the mafia like running the police and running everything else that was going on?
Well, mafia takes advantage always of the periods of crisis. So during these periods of crisis, when things are changing, are drastically changes, mafia, all the criminal organizations, Camorra, 'Ndrangheta, find ways to make money. So it was alive. But, officially, we start talking about mafia during the 60s and 70s with speculation, with building actually speculations. So if mafia is there, sure. Criminal organizations are there, sure. Why? Because many times there was lack of state, lack of institutions. If you take a look at the movie Gomorrah, that I think that was produced in 2008. So Gomorrah talks about, is also defined as neo-realist film for the representation of reality there. But if you consider that film, you can understand the mechanisms of criminal organizations in Italian society and how they are able to develop and to become bigger and bigger, like a cancer, basically.
So let me ask the question: is like, what does this film have to speak? How does it speak to us today? We are no longer in the universe of Trump. We have a virus that's going on. People don't trust the government. Some do, some don't. What does this have to say about us, about empathy, and what do we feel and learn by watching this?
Well, this is a movie that's it's a strong social critique, and we've talked about this idea of empathy, and we do see some instances of solidarity and that, but never for Antonio. He never runs into anyone who's willing to help him out, right? Everyone's helping out the other guy. They stopped him when he's stealing a bike. No one stopped the thief that stole his bike. So this is certainly social commentary. And what can we take away from it today? Well, I think it's just it's very pessimistic. I think in all, we talked about the hope at the end of it, with Bruno taking his dad's hand, but that's on a very sort of private and personal level that doesn't go beyond that into the public level. There's still just two anonymous folks walking in that crowd, and there's no solidarity or understanding from anyone outside of Bruno and Antonio. So I just think today we take away from this is maybe it's a universal message, but one that is asking us to be aware of others and practice this form of empathy beyond just in our immediate interests, our immediate family. And today we have a lot of unemployment as well. We have the virus going on, and there's certainly some situations that that parallel those in the film. But that's part of what I think we can take away from it.
Daniele?
I agree with Nick totally. This is it's very pessimistic. Is very negative. Is a tragedy, but it's also the tragedy not of one person. It's about the entire community. So it's not about one thief. It's everybody could become a thief. It's bicycle thieves. It was translated actually originally as bicycle thief, but was not the right translation. It's bicycle thieves because makes us understand that these a responsibility that we have also towards other people. So that's one of the problems, that we always refuse to identify the problems that our neighbor has. When we stop by the red light and we see an homeless person, we tend to avoid that person. We tend to ignore the problems that other people have. We don't realize how little or how big they can be. And so it's awareness. That's, I think, the message of this of the movie.
I think it really does give us the sense of, that it's important to feel empathy for other people. And even somebody who may have stolen something from you might have a story that is deep and resonant.
Yes.
Whereas your first, thoughts are to, like, if you're in Texas, get the gun and shoot the person. But they have this whole universe that's sort of behind them. All right. So we had one question that I would like the two of you to consider. It says, why is this film considered a masterpiece?
Well, many reasons. It's perfect. It's a perfect story, complete, circular plot. In terms of as a film, is perfect. The way that is directed is perfect. The way that the plot is organized is perfect. It's a masterpiece because each spectator of the world should watch a movie like this. There is like a responsibility that we have to watch these masterpieces. If is a less important film, maybe we can avoid it. But I invite each one of you to watch it and rewatch it. And that's also the beauty. This is the kind of film that you can rewatch many times and discover little things. It's so perfect. It is full of details that the first time that you watch, you probably didn't notice, and everything makes sense. So that's a reason why you should watch it. That's why you should consider it a masterpiece.
And good films reward you from rewatching, that you see details and connections to things. This set up that. Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
And you see it very, very differently. Nicholas, what have you got to say for why is this film a masterpiece?
Well, to build off what Daniele just said, I think um, it's full of information. De Sica is a master of putting so much information in single shots and single sequences that it's really hard to even digest it all in one viewing, for sure. This asks you, as a matter of fact, to view it again and again. But I think it just layers several levels of meaning on this, right? It's a simple story. Bike gets stolen. He needs a bike for a job. He's looking for his bike, right? It's sort of a mythical quest story. We got to find this bike. Let's go. And then you have, it's also a philosophical, let's say, discussion that's going on at the same time. And this is what really makes it, to me, a work of art rather than just a newsreel or a documentary. In that it is, we talked about the social commentary and social critique that's going on there, but too about the whole society in general. Right after the war, we have this adult world that seems to be very individualistic, and it really has turned everyone into bicycle thieves, right? Yeah, we don't know what another one's situation maybe is worse than mine. Like, he sees the thief and he's worse off than he is. So that really just turns his moral compass. He has no real direction anymore after experiencing that. Even concepts of justice. The police come, yeah, you're right, he did steal your bike, but the policeman says, look down there. I mean, you have no witnesses. All these people are going to speak in his favor. And I think Bruno too is really the linchpin here, because he represents, children in neorealist films can present different things. With Rossellini, it was hope for the future. I think here in De Sica, and as well as in his other films where he has children, is that they are more sort of represent the opposite of this individualistic society of the adults, right? They have not yet been corrupted by that society yet. And so for them, it's clear, right? Black and white, more black and white, and what's right, what's wrong. Bruno has a, as you said, very good head on his shoulders. He knows what's right, what's wrong. And then in that moment when he grabs his dad's hand, he understands just the way Antonio comes to understand this world is, I don't know which way to turn anymore. This is, I'm making all kinds of mistakes, but Bruno doesn't really make any mistakes because his world is black and white. It's clear what he's got to do. There's no gray area for him. And then accepting his dad's failures and realizing that, are they really failures? Not so sure. So I think all these sort of different levels of meaning they just come together very well in this production, which is, again, it's directed beautifully by De Sica. The acting, even though they're non-professionals, they're brilliant. I mean, you couldn't have done it any better, I think.
Performances and the photography, the cinematography is
Yes, yep.
stunningly beautiful. So
Stunning.
let me ask both of you. So what happens to Bruno? What's Bruno doing when he's 20 years old?
That's a good question.
When he's 20. Oh, let's see. That would have been he was 8 years old in 1948. So he's 20 in 1960, right?
Yeah.
Is my math good?
Close enough.
He has he's a public official. That's what I think. The public official. He's trying to bring some dignity and respect back to the public institutions in Italy.
How about you, Daniele? What do you think?
I mean, my other director that I really like, Italian director that I really like, is Antonioni.
Huh.
So Antonioni directed films during the late 40s, 50s, and 60s. So my hope is that Bruno is in one of Antonioni's films, and one day I'll be able to find him. Or maybe Pasolini, that is also another director that I love.
Well, guys,
I mean,
yeah, go on.
Yeah, no, this is the beauty of Italian cinema, that you start with one film, with one director, and then there is a huge universe behind that window that you open.
So my last question to both of you is, can you recommend for our audience one other film, Italian film, that everybody needs to see who has maybe not seen it? And Daniele, you get to throw first.
Okay. I mean, I like Antonioni. So now that I said Antonioni, unfortunately I said Antonioni, so I'm going to go with one of Antonioni's films. Probably I'm going to say Red Desert.
Red Desert, can't go wrong with Red Desert.
Yeah.
Although I might go for Blow Up, but they're both very good.
Yeah, Blow Up is also good.
Nicholas, what do you say?
Well, I'm going to go with, since it's Women's History Month.
Right. Raquel reminded us.
Yes, exactly. I'm going to go with a little known director, Alice Rohrwacher, who has done 3 films now. And amazingly enough, she is the first Italian woman to win the jury prize at Cannes for her second film, which was called Le Meraviglie, The Wonders. And I think that's a great film, very much in the neo-realist sort of vein as well. The Wonders, Alice Rohrwacher.
All right, well, guys, thank you so much. It was just been such a joy to have you talk about this wonderful film. Yeah. Makes me want to come and hang out in one of your classes one day.
Anytime.
If you want to bring me in as a guest, I'll come in and talk to your class.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know the Italian side, but I know the film side. And
that's good enough.
These films really speak to me in a very deep way. I mean, I believe in the power of cinema to help us be better people. And this
Mhm.
film really does that in a very profound way. And it's something that, as we think about works to create as artists, is something for us to strive for.
Thank you, Bart, for having us.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you.
thank you.
It's been a great joy. Thank you all for coming and joining us. And thank you for those of you who are on Facebook Live, who I have no idea where you are, but thank you all for joining us. I'm not exactly sure what we're doing next week, but we will be back on Thursday night with something special. Guys, thank you. Have a great weekend. And
Take
for
care.
those of you on spring break, don't go any place you shouldn't go.
Bye.
Right?
Watch a movie.
Watch a movie, stay at home. Thank you all.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Ciao.
All right, stop.